Now, as for the latch for her, I can give you a spool and a string or a hook and an eye. Now, you have your choice there. Now, the cost of a spool and string is practically nothing, but they ain't positive in action. If somebody comes out and starts rattling the door, either the spool or the string is apt to give way, and there you are. But with a hook and an eye, she's yours. You might say for the whole afternoon, if you're so minded, of course. But you put on that hook and eye of the best quality, because there ain't nothing, there just is nothing, that'll rack a man's nerves more to be sitting there pondering without a good, strong, substantial latch on the door. And he agreed with me. Now, I says, what about windows? Now, some want them, some don't. They ain't as popular as they used to be. Now, if it was me, Elmer, I'd say no windows, and I'll tell you why. Now, you take for instance, somebody coming out, maybe they're just in a hurry, or maybe they waited too long. If the door don't open right away and you won't answer them, 9 times out of 10, they'll go around, and they'll go around again, and they'll look in the window. And you don't get no privacy, the privacy you ought to have. Now, how about ventilators? On the designs I cut into doors, I can give you stars, diamonds, or crescents. That ain't much choice. All give good service. Now, a lot of people like stars because they throw a ragged shadow. They like that ragged shadow that comes in. Others like crescents because they're graceful and simple. Now, last year we was cutting a lot of stars. You know, they're going out of style. But this year, people are kind of quieting down, and they're running more to crescents this year. I do cut some twine and hearts now and then for young married couples, and bunches of grapes for the newly rich. Now, these last two designs come under the head of novelties, a little more expensive, and I don't very often suggest it. Actually, it takes a little more time, runs into money. Now, remember, Elmer, I wouldn't make no snap judgments on ventilators, because they've got a lot to do with the beauty of the structure. And don't overdo it like Doc Turner did. Oh, he wanted stars and crescents, both, against my better judgment. And now he's sorry. Of course, it's too late, because when I cut them, they're cut. That's the way it is. And, gentlemen, you can get mighty tired sitting there day after day looking at a ventilator that ain't to your liking. Now, I never use knotty timber, either. Very important point. All clean white pine. And I'll tell you why. Now, you take a knot hole. If it doesn't fall out, it will get pushed out. And if it comes in the door, 9 times out of 10, it will be too high to sit there and look out, but just the right height for some snooper to sneak around, peek in, and there you are, catched again. Now, I says, how do you want that door to swing? You want that door to swing opening in or out? He says he didn't know. So I says it should open in. Now, this is the way it works out. You place yourself in there, okay? That door coming in, say about 45 degree, it opens in. Now, this gives you air, lets the sun beat in. Now, if you hear somebody coming, you can give it a quick shove with your foot, and there you are. But if she swings out, where are you? You can't run the risk of having her open for air or sun, because if anyone comes, you can't get up there off that seat, reach around and grab her without getting caught. How can you? He could see I was right. So I built his door like all my doors, swinging in, and of course facing east, to get the full benefit of the sun. And I tell you, gentlemen, there ain't nothing more restful than to get out there in the morning, comfortable seated, with the door about 3/4 open. The old sun beating in on you sort of relaxes the body, makes you feel mighty, mighty restful. Now, I says, what about the painting of her? What color? What color do you want her, Elmer? He says, red. Elmer, I says, I can paint her red. Red makes a beautiful job. Or I can paint her bright green, or any one of a half dozen other colors, and they're all mighty pretty, but it ain't practical to use a single solid color. And I'll tell you why. She's too darn hard to see at night. You need a contrast, just like on them railroad crossing bars, you know, with all them white and black stripes. You can see them in the dark. Now, if I was you, I'd paint her a bright red with white trimmings, just like your barn. Then she'll match up nice in the daytime, and you can spot her easy at night when you ain't got much time to go scouting around. Yep, a lot of fine points to putting up a first-class privy that the average man just don't think about. It's no job for an amateur. You take my word on it. Now, there's a whole lot more to it than you can see by just taking a few squints at your neighbors. Well, one of the worst tragedies you heard about it around here in years was because old man Clark's boys thought they knowed something about this kind of work, and they didn't. They really didn't. Old man Clark, you know him. If he's a day, he's 97. Lives over there across the holler with the boys. Asked me to come over and estimate on their job. My price was too high, I said. So they decided to do it themselves. And that's where the trouble begun. I was doing a little paper hanging at the time for that widow that lives down past the old creamery. As I drive by, I could see the boys are working, of course. I didn't want to butt in, so I used to holler at them on the way by, and I'd say, neighborly like, something like this, "Hey, boys, see you're doing a little building." You see, I didn't want to act like I was butting in on their work, but I knowed all the time they was going to have trouble with that privy, and they did. From all outside appearances, it was a regulation job, but not being experienced along this line, they didn't anchor her. Now, you see, I put a 4x4 that runs from the top right straight on down 5 foot into the ground. Now, that's why you never see any of my jobs upset on Halloween night. They might pull 'em out, but they'll never upset 'em. Now, here's what happened. They didn't anchor theirs, and they painted it solid red. 2 bad mistakes. Well, Halloween night came along, darker than pitch. Old man Clark was out in there. Some of them devilish neighbor boys was out for no good, and they upset her with the old man in it. Of course, the old man got to calling, and his boys heard the noise. One of them says, "What's the racket? Somebody must be in the chickens." So they took the lantern, started out to the chicken shed. They didn't find anything wrong there, of course. They started back to the house. Then they heard the dog bark, and one of his boys says, "It sounds like that barking is over towards the privy." It being painted red, they couldn't see she was upset, so they started over there. In the meantime, the old man had gotten so confused that he started to crawl out through the hole, yelling for help all the time. The boys recognized his voice and come running, but just as they got there, he lost his hold and in he fell. Well, after that, they just called. They didn't go near him. So you can see what a tragedy that was, and they tell me he has been practically ostracized from society ever since. Well, time passed, and I finally got Elmer's job done. And gentlemen, everybody says that next to my 8-holer, it's the finest piece of construction work in the county. I tell you, sometimes when I get to feeling blue and thinking I hitched my wagon to the wrong star and maybe I should have took up chiropractic or veterinary, I just pack up the little woman and the kids in the back of the car, and I start out aiming to fetch up at Elmer's place long about dusk. Well, when we gets to the top of the hill overlooking his place, you know where that hill is, we stops. I slips the gear in neutral. We just sit there, looking at that beautiful sight. There sits that privy, on that knoll near the woodpile, painted red and white. Morning glories growing up over her, and Mr. Sun bathing her in a burst of yeller color as he drops back on them hills. You can hear the dog barking in the distance, bringing the cows up for milking, and the slow squeak of Elmer's windmill pumping away, day after day, the same as me. As I look at that beautiful picture of my work, I'm proud. I heaves a sigh of satisfaction, my eyes fill up, and I says to myself, folks are right when they say that next to my 8-holer, that's the finest piece of construction work I ever done. It's beautiful. I know that at that point, I know I done right in specializing. I'm sitting on top of the world, and I hope that boy of mine who's growing up like a weed keeps up the good work when I'm gone. With one last long look, we pulls away. I slips my arm around the missus, and I says, "Nora, Elmer don't have to worry. He's a boy that's got hisself a privy. He's a boy that's got hisself a privy. A mighty, mighty pretty privy. A beautiful privy." Hey, if you're curious, this is it. This is called The Specialist, and it's a famous American. It's a true Americana, really, and the guy who performed it and wrote it was known on the stage as a Chic-Sale. Chic-Sale. Actually, his real name was Charles Sale.